hopefully everyone can hear and see the presentation. Having a couple of difficulties just before we went live with my audio, so even if it's just a little thumbs up, or Mal, just confirm you can hear me as well.
I can hear you. I'm just putting in the group chat. Any technical queries to the Q&A, please. Someone will help you there.
Excellent. Great. Well, as Seb introduced us there, for the next hour, we're going to be looking and talking through the crossover. And again, just reiterating what Seb said there, that there are different names given to this: common assessment material, crossover, overlap, whatever you want to call it. Hopefully we're going to clarify and sum up what it is today, but also the importance of what it is and how to use it. And in particular, the story of those last 15 years. And when Seb said 15, you think, oh, where's the time gone? But yeah, how it's evolved into what it is today, being the crossover, and how we utilise it. And the introduction slides here now in terms of about us. I know we had these on, and for anyone who's listened to us rabble on before on these online sessions or up and down the country when we've been at the collaborative hubs with Pearson, we like to start off and put a bit of context about who we are, what we are. We are teachers. Mal has literally rushed home today from the classroom to get back. And I think that just sums up that we're there at the chalk face. We're doing the job. We know exactly what we're talking about. Hopefully it works in the context. And to be fair, what we're talking about today, the crossover, is relevant in every school. It may be a big part of your school. It might be a small part of your school. But the crossover is huge no matter what scenario we're in. It works in every environment. But we are teachers. We've worked at the most improved school in England. Not one of them, the most improved school in England. Admittedly, that was back in 2013, but we still like to live off the back of that one, don't we, Mel? Little smile. We then moved to another school and actually took that, and we won the TES award. That's a bit more recent. That was 2016. Now, we haven't got any more accolades to throw because there's been 2 years where we couldn't have done anything like all of us. And to be fair, it's taken 2 years, but it's actually landed in our household now. So my son has got it. And I can say that comfortably because you're all not sitting around my house. But we are 2 years into, or 2 years over this, but we are teachers. We know what's going on. We have worked our socks off in the schools that we have worked in to try the best to get the results that have come out. But we are teachers, and we've done all right in the last few years. I like to just do a little bit of a rewind here and just talk about going back to 2012, I think. In fact, just building up to 2012. But there is a massive reason why we talk about this rewind and coming up to the present day, because the crossover didn't just happen. It wasn't something that someone told us about and said, oh, look at this. This is where you should focus, or have a look at this document. It all happened from 2010, 2011 onwards. And I've kind of summed it up there on that slide with introduction of QWC questions, quality of written communication. If you remember the star that was there, and apologies for anyone who sat listening to this who may not have even been born in 2012. Is that possible? No, it's not possible, but you never know. 2017, the 9 to 1 came in and the 3 papers, and 2022, what we're working up towards right now, big question marks. Let's hope we are working up towards that. I'm pretty sure we will be. But that journey, and I'm going to delve into it a little bit more on the next couple of slides, what we're going towards now for 2022. So does anyone remember, and I've put this on there in the actual question, not just the start part as well. So the start part is the QWC, written communication. It was the first question of its sorts in 2012. we were prepared for this big change, 2010, 2011, it's coming, the new problem-solving questions, and then this was the first of its kind. And what a great question, and we pull it out, don't we, still with our Year 11s, Year 10s, now, just to show them the type of question that was new. It's the norm now. It was new back in 2012, but this kind of wrapping different topics together and trying to fight through to get to the final answer. But Mr. Weaver's a very famous person in our world. We talk about him on a regular basis. I'm not sure what he's up to now, but he used to have 2 ponds. It was quite good back in 2012 to have 2 ponds. He's now got a swimming pool. He's living in Miami. Look at him. But rewinding to 2012, that was a big change that happened. Early entry. The March sit-in. Mal, correct me if I'm wrong, because we marked during this period. I'm pretty sure it was 2012 and 2013.
You're such a nerd, you are, when it comes to questions. Knowing, what question was it that had that frequency tree? It's like, November 17. I'm just going to just check so everybody is aware. There is about a 10-second delay between what we're saying and what you're seeing, if that makes sense. So there is that. So sometimes what we're saying might not match up to the slides. And what was your question, Seager?
Early entry, no, March sit-in. I'm pretty sure it was back in 2012, 2013. So at one point, we were utilising the early entry, not as anything other than having another go. We were never saying you're finishing your GCSE maths if you get your grade C at this point. They were carrying on to better it on the next sit-in. A bit like a driving test, if you like. But there was early entry. There was the March sit-in, so you could have sat it in the November, the March and the summer. But yeah, that was going back a bit now for those years. Oh, do you remember intermediate tier? So this is going back pre-2012 now. I haven't got these in the right order, have I? But intermediate tier, and I know a lot of people dip into the Emporium, and the Emporium is great. Don't forget about Edexcel's Emporium with all the drawers, and go and have a look at the old intermediate paper. Go back and see the type of maths that they judged sat between foundation and higher. I think it's really interesting, the level of maths that was judged to sit in the middle. Not for any negative or any positive reasons, just to know that is that kind of bit that sits in the middle. Modular. I remember I was in my first or second year of teaching, and the head of maths said, right, we're going to do modular with year 10 because you've got the set middle ability, middle attainers, you're going to trial the modular. And we sat the modular paper, the first one, and it was data handling, and the group blitzed it. They thought GCSE maths is a piece of cake. So then they didn't do any work for the next one, which was the algebra-based paper, and they all bombed it. And it was just so bizarre to try and chunk maths into modules. I never got my head around it, so I quickly moved off that and got back onto the linear, and that's spiralling to get better at everything, which we build in right now to this day, particularly with our starters that we'll talk about a little bit later. Graduated assessment. This was OCR only, so apologies on a Pearson session to talk about something from OCR, but I think it's important because it was huge back that year. Have I just clicked back? I don't know what I've done there. So OCR brought out their graduated assessments, and it was 1 to, I think it was 8 or 9. So don't get that mixed up with the GCSE.
No, it went up to 10 because I've got copies of everyone here.
Yeah, yes, Mel's still got copies.
I haven't. I didn't say that.
Maths is maths. But yeah, of course they went to 10. And it was trying to pitch the right module for the students. And I think if you went and overlapped a certain number of modules, it's, Anna's agreeing, 1 to 10. You can aim towards that grade C. But a lot of schools jumped on the back of it. It wasn't around very long, but interesting again to try and work out what that common area is that work towards that grade C back then. Let's think about it as a grade 4/5 right now. And again, that intermediate paper gives you that idea of where it was because of where the grades fell. and thinking about it now in terms of higher and foundation. But again, let's go back one more. This has got nothing to do with anything other than I hope it never comes back. Apologies if I offended anyone there, but data handling coursework, the coursework at GCSE. Who remembers the Mayfield data? Again, apologies if the only time you remembered it is when you actually did it at school, but it was hard work. And we had a fairly recent reminisce of this when we did the last sitting of the GCSE Stats at our previous school. And again, I'm sure we said several times, never again. And then we did it the following year, I think, Mal, didn't we?
Yeah.
Very so.
But GCSE Statistics is another interesting qualification for certain groups. Because it's all about Anna's showing her age, so she's showing her age. The GCSE Statistics, it is all about context, and I think the one thing with us, I always like to do a health warning about context. That the kind of schools that we've worked in are your normal bog standards, comprehensives. We're not selective in any way, but also schools that are in a mess. Not necessarily in a mess. They're not where they should be. So they are challenging, but brilliant at the same time. And some of you will be able to empathise. Somebody said, I remember marking it. Is that statistics? Oh, but yeah, we did statistics. It's a really interesting qualification for certain groups of students. And I think I've always said that when we did the statistics training, that I think there's an argument there that we should, with some schools, have it as part of a 3-year plan to try to get it as an option in your curriculum for students to be able to opt in, like they would history or geography. But you've got to be able to get the numbers to justify it. But we did it for some students, and it was tough.
But there's no coursework now for the current 9-to-1 stats, so don't let our reminiscing put you off, because it's nothing the same at all now. It's a revamped 9-to-1 course, but again, the main thing without the coursework. But let's pick on our successes and why I've taken us on that journey. So pre-2012, 3 tiers, modular maths, whatever you want to look at that happened back then, we made the call. And this is, I think, partly because what I did at school, but also how I felt teaching it. I needed to teach the linear course. I had to have the chance to intertwine the different topics together. And lo and behold, you start seeing how the questions are coming together now, particularly at higher. They overlap each other so much. And I had to do that back in 2012. So when our school was going down the route, and not the school I'm at now, but it was going down the route of saying, right, we want you to do the OCR graduated assessment, I actually begged and pleaded to say, please let me stick with the EdXL linear course. Let me do it. And funnily enough, my results in that class absolutely smashed everyone else's. And that's not down to me. That's down to understanding the course that I was doing and knew it inside out. But I've said it in red there, sticking with the linear course and knowing it inside out. It's also helped both myself and Mal. We've marked for many years. We haven't done it recently, like none of us have, but we marked for many years and got to know that, and I think it's a brilliant thing to do. So any guys in their early, it's not NQT anymore, it's ECT, early career teachers, or anyone that just hasn't done it before, it's worth doing just to get to that knowledge that automatically gets taught to your students. And I remember it's a topic that doesn't exist, or an area of maths that doesn't exist anymore, but trial and improvement, and me knowing how to get those 4 marks through marking was what enabled my groups to be so successful at it. Introduction to QWC questions, and that was around the same time as the early multiple entry. But again, it was all about knowing the key topics that were commonly examined. And we were, like many schools up and down the country, we were really, really pushing our students to get onto higher, not because we felt it was easier or more accessible. It's just that we knew how to teach to it. We were marking for it. We could get through the content that we needed to for students going even down the attainment range to be successful at higher. That's changed now. So it's not something that I'm saying is we're matching forward to this GCSE. But again, it's this common area of maths that's kind of homing in to what this whole session's about. And then in 2017, well, actually 2012, when they announced it, the start of the teaching actually for the 2017 papers, we knew what was coming. We haven't had a great deal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these sittings, 9 to 1, 3 papers, higher and foundation, 2 calculator papers, 1 non-calculator. And I think it was Mal, because Mal loves to have a good nose through all the paperwork that's sent out from whether it's DFE, government. And it was, I remember you saying, look at this here. There's common material between the two. This is going to be our focus where we look at as teachers to get our head around this new GCSE. Let's break it down. It was Mal, it was me stressing and flapping like I normally do. And Mal saying, let's find somewhere that we can home into, get our head around this, and then develop our knowledge of the course. And that was it. And we named it, Mal named it, the crossover from that very first, I've got it here somewhere, my tea-stained document. I'll find it during the course of today because my office is an absolute mess. But that DFE document that we talk about, I mean, it's on the slides in a minute, that was, I remember Mal showing me from day one, this is where we need to look at. So as much as it's all changed, it was actually quite refreshing. Let's look at somewhere that's really going to get our head around that course. Oh, here it is. There's a picture for you. In 10 seconds' time, you'll see it. I've just clicked it. But the GCSE subject content and assessment objectives, Google that, you will find it. Don't get put off by the date that says 2013. There we go. That is correct. That is when it was last updated or last relevant because it was to do with the 2017 sit-in. Have a copy of that on your desk at work. I can't recommend it enough because even now, how many years later is it? Oh, 2012. We're talking 9 years later. Yeah. We're still making reference to that now and dipping back into just to sanity check whether something is in higher foundation, whether it's higher only, whether it's supposed to be foundation only, that area of maths that we want to definitely know whether it's going to be for all or some of our students. And again, these are just the scribbles. I took a quick photo and put it into the presentation. We've come back on, like I think you can see the trig ratios on that slide there, remembering that for your foundation students. But anything in that document that is underlined will be or can be in higher or foundation. And it is vital to just get your head around that document, even if it's just something you dip into every now and again, vital. And I think there's one more picture on it. And this is the question that we had to ourselves, even we're going back to within the last 6 months, I think 12 months, SERDs. And we had a whole big conversation, and anyone who remembers Graham Cumming that used to work at the Emporium, but is now one of the credible specialists, just like myself and Mal, who works with Pearson. We got him involved in a conversation just to clarify a couple of things in terms of SERDs. We want to know about SERDs. How will that appear when it comes into the foundation? Is it explicit or is it within? Leave your answer in terms of pi, for example. And I think that's where we narrowed it down to that kind of area. So it's great conversations within your department on what are these areas, what is it exactly, and going back and looking at certain questions that have cropped up in the previous 6 or 7 sittings. I said, I keep looking back here because I've got all the sittings up on my wall. But yeah, Seb introduced us. We've put together a revision guide. We've got one ourselves. And again, this is not a plug and this is nothing to do with Pearson, but it was 3 years in the making to make sure we got it spot on, that it was the crossover. So a couple of questions for you here. Crossover or not? We've got a bit of a delay, Mal, so we might have to just keep an eye on the chat. And I just was going to try and get from you guys, even if it's just a yes, no, maybe, defo, whatever you want to put in that chat for this question, what you think of the crossover and exactly what it is. So, again, bit of a delay, so we might have to watch these come in on the group chat. Yes, crossover, here we go.
Seeing lots of yeses. Yep.
Yes. So this is I'm going to throw a little question to Mal to see if she can develop this one while we're still on this slide. Crossover. Do we mean, Mal, between higher and foundation or on an exam, higher and foundation? This is a question I know the answer for, everyone, by the way. So it's just...
So you're talking about the common assessed items, or are you talking about the content that we would teach?
Exactly. So what is the difference between something that's crossover? For example, pie charts. We've talked about this before. There was a pie chart question back on the first sit-in, but we've always said pie charts is definitely a crossover area of maths that we've got to concentrate on, but it was only on the foundation paper that year.
Yes, but it's still part of the underlying content, so it was to be something that all of our students get taught. So it's not just the exam. There's two different things. You've got your commonly assessed items, which is the content that is assessed on both higher and foundation. It is usually, and different boards have taken different ways of doing this. Pearson's from day one was that the last sort of questions, apart from the very one or two questions on foundation, will be the ones that the higher tier will start on. The decision was made that it's not necessary. The last question won't appear as will be question one. So there's always that last question, sometimes two. And of which the analysis I've done, so Seager makes me out to be a real geek, and I'm not doing myself any justice here. But it's not just so then of which each board is slightly different, but it's roughly 30% of the marks that are available are common assessed items with Pearson, or that's the average that it's been over those 7 sit-ins. Different papers vary slightly, so one paper might be 33 and the other one might be 29, but the average comes in at roughly 30%. The other boards are all very similar, and it's just something that they have progressed over time as the papers have changed slightly. So about 30% of those marks that are available will be common assessed items. But when we talk about the crossover, we're talking about, so for example, standard form is a crossover item, may appear on both as those cut. We're not just, when you would teach it to your higher and foundation students, but it might be that standard form only appears in foundation, or as Seager used the pie charts one, pie charts only appeared on the foundation tier. 1 year, but it would be something that we would teach all of our students. So it is something that and I truly believe this, that no matter what stage your students are at, so your low prior retainers, in order for them to aspire to the grade 4 or 5 on foundation, they need to be getting into that back end of the paper. So they need to be getting looking at crossover material. Yes, granted, the teacher judgment comes in that you go, actually, I'm not going to push them onto simultaneous equations. But then my argument would be that some of those students will be able to get one process mark on those kind of topics. And so there's some interesting stats that we usually use that Seager brings out. And there was a girl, she came in with a key stage 2 of about, we'd equate it to it today of about 88 as a standardised score. And she managed to get, so vectors is traditionally a topic you may not teach to your low prior retainers, but because she was given access to the entire foundation tier, including all of that crossover material. It was really nice to see that she had that perseverance to keep on going. Is part A, but also she was able to get marks on the very last vector question, which some people will think, well, she target grade of a 2, but she came out with a 4. And then if we take our middle attaining students, which I still think is our biggest challenge, and we're facing it right now with year 11 about tiering decisions, I can't see that going away, because we've got students that absolutely are resilience. We've got students today that, when we're looking at the analysis of year 11, and this will ring lots of bells for people, where they're scoring poorly on the higher tier, yet they can bust it on foundation, but you know that they can go on to get a grade 6, but they're not even getting a grade 4 or 5 on higher tier because they haven't covered the content, but also they haven't got the resilience. But it's that difference that for some students, maths doesn't have to be hard. So you'll know there's a small number of students that will struggle to get 10 marks on a higher tier, that you'll give a foundation paper and they will get 50. And you think that moving to that higher tier, and this is the reality, and that's the one thing I am, is it's a bit of a reality check, that they will now what's the words I'm thinking of? They will flourish being the top of a foundation tier group rather than being the bottom of the higher tier group. And you almost think that if they had been exposed to the crossover material earlier, that they may have been able to cope better with the higher tier. But again, that's about context, because we're on a part of a 3-year improvement journey with the department that we're at. So when we talk about crossover, it is material that all of our students, so our higher tier students, that based on prior attainment, our high prior attainment students, we're ensuring they cover this crossover material in year 9, with a view that then will give us enough time to look at developing their resilience and giving them enough exposure of the complexities of the higher tier, because the assessment objectives on a higher tier are different. I believe it takes a different set of skill set, or a different skill set. So the crossover is something we genuinely believe is everybody should be taught, regardless of where they are, but it's just that it might happen at different points of their school journey. So that was the long answer. I don't know if there was a short answer, Seager.
I think you just hit a massively important point, though, that every student has got to be exposed to this, and we try and make it explicit of what it is to these students. We tell them consistently and continually throughout, and we are a high school, so they start at year 9. You are concentrating here on the crossover between the two. We talk about it in that language. We show them exam questions like we're talking about right now. And those higher attainers that you want to push on to go and get that higher, they will forget their crossover. They will forget, I'm not saying their basics here, I'm saying they will forget their basics for them. They will forget parts that you have to then interweave to their learning when they are looking at that top end stuff. They cannot forget, and I think I can sum it up here now. A foundation to succeed, you've got to know your basic maths plus your crossover. To succeed on a higher paper, you've got to know your crossover plus your juicy maths. What's in common there? The crossover, that 30% that Mal just mentioned. So going back to the answer to this one, absolutely right. Yes, it's a question 3 on a higher, question 24 on a foundation. I can't remember what sitting I found them from. I think it was 2019, but forgive me if I'm wrong on that one. So we're looking here at and really summing up, it's the maths, not whether it was on an exam. But that just sums it up, that it is a definite crossover there on that one. So if you can see that, it's quite small for what I'm looking at, but I think you guys can make it your full screen. It's not necessarily the graphs or the drawing of it. It was looking at the word roots there, the roots of the equation, part B. What do we think there, guys? And I think you're all probably going to go with the fact that you sat here for a crossover session, go yes, yes, yes. but it's more, in fact, actually part A as well, turning points of a graph, that proper language. And let's face it, if we rewind 8 years or so, we'd only be talking that kind of language at A level. And then roots, turning points, yes, higher. If I give you the answer, guys, just so we can crack on a little bit. Oh, Tina knows too much. Question 29, It was only in the foundation only. But of course, it is a crossover area. Now, I can't remember if, in fact, it was the last question, and Mal just made that point. There is a bit of a rule here that they try and stick to, that the last question on the foundation, or the last two, doesn't appear on the higher, just purely. So it's not that, it's a fairness thing, I think, that some think that, or a question that the foundation students just might not get to, time, any other reason, I don't know, but it's the given first question on a higher. It's not fair. So that last first thing does not happen. But of course, that language, that type of question, if I flick back to it, turning points, roots, yes, that is a crossover area, but it just happened in that sitting to be on a foundation paper only.
I think at that point, I think it's important we understand that the content has not been prescribed by Pearson. It's not been prescribed by each exam board. This is DFE content, and the intention is that we're raising the maths ability of our students. There is an argument to say, why are we teaching them about turning points and roots, and I get that, but also we operate within the system that we've got. And sometimes some students you'll find will actually pick up on this stuff. And again, it's about context and the different groups of students.
We've got the equation, finding the equation. So finding an equation of a line. I'll get through these a bit quicker because there we go. Question 322. So yes, it was on both, but of course, straight line, y equals mx plus c. It's a definite crossover between the two. I picked this one on purpose because I quite like this. A very wordy question. Multiples in context, I suppose, there. But if you remember, it was quite a tough question. How many cards are both a star and a circle on? And it's always done badly whenever we've done that question with our groups, I know for a fact. But that one, there you go, I think Tina's got it. It's foundation. And it was only question 15, way before the crossover. And I've put this as a question mark. This is not me to then, as a prompt, say, yes, of course, it's a crossover. That's a question. But could you see that cropping up on a higher paper, particularly the early questions, 1, 2? I think so. I think the way it's worded, the level of complexity there and steps to do it, and also the amount of work involved to get it in some situations for some students, I think you wouldn't see it out of place at the start of a higher paper. So we are talking about quite a range of areas here, but it's always making reference back to not the exam boards, that DFE programme of study that Mal said it's prescribed from these guys at central government, that this is the areas that it's going to be. Is there a set percentages of foundation that is crossover? I think Mal's the best one to answer that question from Lee there, Mal.
Of the foundation, that is crossover. Yeah, it's 30%. So 30% of the marks available is it's crossover. I don't know.
Is it set?
Oh, is there a set percentage? Well, there is the assessment of the technical spec for the GCSE does lay out what percentage of the material needs to be aimed at grades. So on the higher tier, 50% of the material is aimed at grade 7 and above. I'd have to look at my percentages. It's such a long time since I looked at this. Grades, maybe Seb can come back in with that one and give us the information. So yeah, there is a set percentage. So if you consider your grade 3, 4, 5 are your crossover grades that can be awarded on both tiers, but bear in mind there is no grade 3 material anymore on the higher tier. It's only grade 4 and 5, whereas in the previous spec there was grade D material. So that was what is different about this higher tier, is there is no grade 3 material. And I think it's 25%, if I remember rightly, and don't quote me on this, 25% is aimed at the grade 4 and possibly grade 5, or grade 25%, up to 25% is aimed at the grade 4, with another 25% your grade 5 and 6, and 50% 7 and above on the higher tier. And I think, yes, so students with it's called a concessionary grade 3. So it is there to ensure students don't drop off the higher, but we have to ask ourselves the argument, and I think about that experience about dropping off the higher and how I swing back and forth about the experience of students and whether or not, and again, it's about context. So for some students, going in, scratching around for 15 marks isn't a great experience. But they've got the resilience to understand, they've got the emotional maturity to understand what they're doing, whereas others, they just they couldn't cope with that. So in terms of the set percentages that could be crossover, I would suggest that it's probably aiming at, you're close to 45, 50% that would be crossover on both tiers, but it's bigger than that we've got to look at the skills. So for example, I'm going to use an analogy from today where we were doing estimation, and this is where the prior knowledge and that expertise as a subject teacher, we were doing estimation where the bottom number ended up as dividing by 0.5, and we got to the point where some of the kids were able to say, oh, I'm dividing by a half, so I times by 2. But as soon as it became dividing by 0.2, they couldn't relate that percentage, that decimal of 0.2 to a fifth. So we had to slip that in today to look at filling in those gaps about dividing decimals, which is not a crossover topic, but you've got to go back and try to unpick why they're not able to access some of that crossover material. And it's not necessarily the estimation they couldn't do, it was as I keep saying, it's your sums, your calculations, your numeracy, which we need to keep picking up on. And I keep banging on about prior knowledge. And
your analysis, Mal, that came out with that in and around 30% is
yes.
of literally what is on the foundation to match up what is sitting on that higher.
Yes.
I think that's the best stat of them all, regardless of what is out there as guidelines. Mal has done it, and it's always coming in or around 30% in terms of they sit on that paper, it's on that paper.
Yeah. So, so it is. It comes in about 30% based on the attack. But what is interesting is that because we focus on that purely with our intervention groups specifically, so if I'm looking at our specific groups, assuming that these are the students that aren't where they should be at the start of year 11, to focus on 34% of marks, or 30% of the marks for the last 9 months, I think is probably about, it feels right. So Bridget's just saying, so it's roughly 24, can be as high as 27, but across each 3 sittings, for the 7 sittings of the analysis that I've done, it is 30%. But that's common assessed, that doesn't mean crossover material.
Hi, Mel. Sorry, I was having trouble putting something in group chat then. Just to confirm, between 25 and 33% of marks on that are common, so that equates to between 20 and 26 marks on a given paper.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Seb.
Thanks, Seb. So, of course, that is foundation. Only question 15. Oh, yeah, we've already said that one. Triple brackets. Where will we see triple brackets?
No one? Higher.
Hey, higher.
Yeah. Remember, there's a 10-second delay.
It felt like a lifetime, though, didn't it? When you. Did
you notice I went silent on you as well?
You went silent. you did it as well. I thought I was on my own. Yeah, it's higher only, triple bracket. It's something we looked at back at the start of the GCSE, but it's something that we love to push certain students on when we have the opportunity to show them, and also when time permits, how it works. Not just the kids and the students that will go on to higher, but ones that we want to expose them more deeply into the maths. Time does permit sometimes, but we do like showing them how things evolve. But yeah, question 9. Was you going to say something there, Mel?
Yeah, it's interesting that some two people, David and Michael, have said grade 6 questions, and I think it's really difficult to grade questions and topics as grades, because there is nothing you're talking about. It might be that a grade 6 student the average grade student would achieve highly on that, but it is papers that get graded, not topics or questions. Because I think it's quite difficult, especially it depends who you believe in. So, for example, and we've had quite a discussion this week as a department. This is where being a teacher does help, where we're being asked, if you're teaching a topic, could you stick a question in their book and tell them this is a grade 4 question? And all of the department have kicked back and said, but who's going to grade it? Because I could look at Venn diagrams in one textbook and it's being told it's a grade 4. I can look at it in another textbook and it's a grade 5. And they are basically the professional judgment on what grade a topic is, because there is no definitive grade. It is papers that get graded, so it's an interesting one, isn't it? So then, when we look at specifically in terms of what is the crossover, we've said it's the underlying content, but Pearson's scheme of work that's available on the Emporium. That has been around since 2015, when we were due to start teaching this GCSE, has been split. So what we've done is we split that crossover. We basically, so I'm just trying to find it. So it is taken from the Pearson scheme of work as the basis, and we split it into, we took anything that was in the higher tier and anything that was in the foundation tier, so in terms of specific topics, and I combined them into one document. Anything that was left over in the foundation tier, we called our working towards scheme of work. So that's all of the stuff that's not, what didn't appear in both. And then anything that was left in the higher tier, we called our working above scheme of work. But we were left then with a definitive list of topics that we've put on the screen there, except I've just closed my live view so I can't see what you can see. And so we effectively have three strands to our curriculum. And the crossover there, you'll see the list that we're now teaching. We're teaching it in this order that we've refined it over the last 5 years to find that, and again, go back to what I said earlier, that it's about, this is the scheme of work that we would use for all of our students at some point during their time with us, whether they're higher tier in year 9, higher tier eventually that they get taught it in year 9, or whether there are lower prior attainers that will come onto it when they get into year 10. And we've developed this in such a way that it doesn't necessarily, so it starts, whilst two-way tables, like the health one on this, whilst two-way tables isn't a specific topic, it allows us to kick off their time with us doing lots of numbery stuff. So doing the basic numeracy, adding, subtracting, thinking about their presentation, working logically, ticking questions off. So it allows us to, all of those little skills that it's sometimes really difficult to talk to a student that they may not pick up. We're really explicit about, right, you will tick off bits of the question that you've done. We want you to take the question and we want you to reorganise it in a way that's organised that you can work through.
Exam training, isn't it, Mel, at that point? Yes.
So that's where the crossover, what it means in terms of, so this is, we're not just talking about that 30% that gets assessed, we're talking about the material that could be on both, whether they are on both in terms of their terminal exam, and we've combined them into one scheme of work. And that's a bit more of a closer view of it. So we start off two-way tables, frequency tree, rounding, error intervals, estimation, using the calculator, product of prime factors, and I'm not going to go through the whole list. But then, because what we found with our high middle attainers, sometimes they will think, oh, this is really easy. We do go straight in after we've brought in a reminder of fractions. We do use inverse proportion. That is almost a bit for us. It's a bit like sorting the wheat from the chaff, because there will be students in that room. Again, it's professional judgment that you think, I'm going to try using the constant and proportionality.
Right, either Mal has froze or I have froze. If anyone can just confirm that for me, so whether I carry on or no one can hear me. It's Mal. Okay, so I'll carry on then, while Mal hopefully just refreshes her internet. But yeah, the inverse proportion, and I remember as we were working through that document, trying to find all the areas of maths that really have to be covered. Again, it's quite obvious what they are, but sometimes they're a little bit open. And then looking at the exam board's perception of what those areas are, I remember seeing one of the other exam boards that really did use the constant of proportionality, the language, whereas with other exam boards, not so much, more in terms of context for inverse proportion and even direct proportion. So it was interesting looking at the different perceptions from the exam boards. And then you have the whole question, stem and leaf, no stem and leaf, and stuff like that we definitely keep in there, because not as a topic so much anymore, but more as okay, let's find the median from a stem and leaf diagram. But yeah, it's in an order as well, on purpose, to develop exam skill, exam confidence, but numeracy confidence as well. How many students do we come across each year that you can teach and get through to them certain key big topics, cumulative frequency, box plots, but their basic numeracy is terrible, and you know that they would do better on a higher paper than a foundation paper because of the numeracy, because of their confidence. And then likewise, you have ones that have almost seemed to have stalled at secondary school. They flourished, knew their basic maths, but then don't seem to be soaking up the next level of maths in terms of that crossover, the end of foundation, the start of higher, even though you know, based off their prior attainment at Key Stage 2, based off their numeracy in lesson, they should be pushing on a lot higher and further than where they are. And that crossover in between enables you to really home in on an area that, one, can develop their numeracy, but two, get them ready for either of those exams, whether it's higher or foundation. And you are going to have students, probably even more than normal, this year, next couple of years, when these students have had a lot of time out, not knowing which of the two is best for them to sit, whether it's higher or foundation. And the beauty of crossover for those students in particular, I know Mal says they will be exposed to it at some point, but I'm talking about the ones now we're in year 11 as a particular point, knowing that you can make that call a lot later than what I know it's not going to help when you come to internal exams, mocks, practice papers, etc. But in terms of that final entry, you can make that call later based on the fact that you know that you're preparing them for both. Now, a little anecdote on the side here while we wait for Mal to connect and carry on, but very relevant nonetheless. We, in that first sitting in 2017, pushed crossover. Everything was about what's going to be in both. So we had a big super group. There was 56 students, not 56, there's 56 in the super group now. We had 51 on the register that we didn't know on that first sit-in, are they going to be higher or are they going to be foundation? We just didn't know. They were not performing particularly well at either. And it was about where we go. So we concentrated, like we talked about earlier, on that crossover in between. And then it came further towards the end of the year, and the exam came, and we got them into the right higher or foundation based off the exam. But those ones that did the foundation, which was more than we've ever had done before, based off that pre-early entry sit-in, etc., more doing the foundation than we've ever had before. But then I was worried opening up that first exam in 2017, and there was a picture of a man next to a tree, and it was estimate the height of a man. Well, what's the height of a man? Estimate the height of a tree? And I was concerned. I haven't taught all of this. I just haven't. We haven't had chance to practice or be taught through foundation maths that is only on the foundation paper. But what we was doing all year, and again, I'm going to say this, and I know I keep saying these sessions, the foundation paper challenge was my brilliant bit that happened behind the scenes. Not my brilliant bit, but our school's brilliant bit that happened behind the scenes that I didn't actually think about until the very, very end. So when we had the occasional drop-down day, I actually brought it into lessons every now and again, once a month maybe. We had Saturday schools, revision sessions, and I've just started it. We've actually got it at lunchtime tomorrow for our group. I haven't told Mal this yet, but lunchtime tomorrow, we've got a foundation paper challenge. So for our students, I'm offering it at lunchtime just to come in, little competition. Let's see how far we can get through the foundation paper, starting at the front, not looking at the crossover, and just having that opportunity to go through those nitty-gritty questions and remembering those brilliant conversations you have about don't forget to label the axes. But because we were concentrating so much... There, she's back. Because we were concentrating so much on that crossover, that bit, I was worried, but I was ticking that box completely, and hopefully, I think myself and Mel will agree, we did it really well with the foundation paper challenge. And you can build that in to then enable you to flourish with that crossover material. I think the slide, all these slides are as PDF that you can get somewhere, but they will be emailed out to all the attendees at some point within the next, I think they do say within the next week or so. It was 24 hours, is it? Or 48 hours, I think. Any questions, you can email us anyway, Mary-Ann, just drop us a question on it. So the next slide is the rest of them. And like Mal said, building up to like simultaneous equations. And I'm not saying that simultaneous equations is going to be an area you really flourish with, because it depends on the group you've got in front of you. But it might be that you can really develop the context of it or the idea of it to then pick and pinch marks on these real tough areas that crop up throughout those foundation papers and the start of the higher paper, to be fair. That is our revision guide. Again, no plug, it's just more that it's almost like the definitive list of what's in there. I'm trying my hardest to get a copy out to every school. If you haven't had one, and I can check if you haven't because I've got a spreadsheet, drop me an email and I can just put you towards the top of the list to get it out to you. Just make sure you just give me the full address and I can cross-reference it that I've either sent one or it's further down my list so I can take you off. I'm trying to get through every secondary school, so you've got that copy and it can be on your desk and use it as a reference point as well. Oh, there's the areas of maths that are common to both of those, common to the assessment objectives. A bit of you are back, Mal? Did you say you're back?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
We've had this discussion, and it says a discussion there, but it's a discussion that we're having consistently, but also a little discussion for now, what people think. That top one, more foundation this year than normal, being given the scenario that we're in. This is just, a comment. This is not for us to say right or wrong. This is, we're interested.
Yeah, and I think this is always interesting to get people's response about and people's view about that higher foundation mix that schools will have. again, I keep trying to be the voice of, it sounds like I'm trying to be the dour one. We've just baseline assessed our year 11, and we're now looking at higher or foundation students. And there will always be and I think back to 3 years ago when we went to our current school, we had 51 students that we had to have those tough decisions about which tier of entry. We'd got that down to 17 students this year, or we would have had last summer, and we're hoping to get that down even to the point where we think we'd nailed. So yeah, and I think Anna's just said about confidence, and I think that's right. To sum it up, I think some students, this is about knowing your students really well, will flourish being the top of a foundation tier set rather than being the bottom of a higher tier set. And that's about, again, confidence and that resilience. So, again, see, I don't know at what point I dipped out, but everything just froze. Even my mouse wasn't working. So that the higher and foundation tier of entry is something...
I just went off on the direction talking about the foundation paper challenge. So we're exactly where you left anyway, Mel. So we haven't done any further foundation. But just on the back of a quick question that's gone in the chat about the foundation paper challenge, it's no high stakes. It's nothing nasty. And in fact, in the scenarios that we've done it in, I've never done it in test conditions. It's always about a little bit of a competition between colleagues, and particularly your peer boys will buy into it. Just where you're going to lose your first mark. That's it. And we have this inbuilt competition all year that we want them to nail and ace the first double page of a foundation paper. And that's always the conversations we're having. There should be no one that drops a mark on these. We know they do, but we're trying to instill they've got to get that bit all sorted definitely before they lose a mark. So these competitions build in that idea that they're not going to drop a mark until a good few pages into the exam. And it's what it's really doing, it's making sure that you have those conversations about how many grams are in a kilogram, the height of a man versus the height of a tree, in a different context than it being a lesson about those. I've gone into schools and observed groups being taught how to do rotational symmetry via colouring in year 11. And no disrespect, that's a massive waste of time, particularly the scenarios I saw it in, because these kids, they need to be pushed on. And it was an opportunity that they've been looking at crossover material. And that idea, whether it was a good one or not, it's not me to judge, could have been done in a different environment, maybe within that kind of competition element. And the boys buy into it, they love it. And I did it, I've got a year 11 tutor on a Monday, and they're allowed to do revision. But I knew that I wanted to teach them a bit of math. So I said, right, if you've got no homework or revision here, let's do a bit of a competition. Let's see how far, and I've got a mixture of higher and foundation in there. Let's just see how far you can get through a foundation paper. I'll give them the whole paper. It's a bit naughty, but we do go back into it next when I see them on Monday next time. And a little competition just to see how far they can get. And they run up to me, get it marked. So it's quite nice with a tutor group because there's not a huge amount in there. And in calling them, and it was only a little joke, it's nothing nasty, I'm calling you 1B from now on because you fell on 1B. And this was a higher tier student in our set 1 who fell on a round insignificant figure question. And it levels the playing field. Hold on, foundation is not as easy as I thought it was because I'm always being told I'm pushing for higher. But also it's ticking all of the students' boxes in terms of revision of decimals, significant figures, height of a man, height of a tree. And I'll tell you what, it really builds that buzz and confidence. And again, they're seeing exam question after exam question, but in a different environment. And it really does work. But it's again, that's an aside to build on the foundation while your lessons are predominantly pushing on and keeping the standard high. I don't mean you're losing students, you're keeping the standard high, and high enough for them to really access that back end of a foundation paper successfully. And I think I've just summed up what the bottom line there is. Results have proved it. We are getting excellent results from our students at that back end of a foundation but we're also getting it all the way through their foundation paper because they're good at their numeracy or those type of questions that we've practiced. And then we look on the higher and we marry up between the two.
Yeah, I think just to reiterate those points, those percentage figures there you see are not in a state selected. They're not single sex. They're a normal comprehensive, based on a school that when we went in there was getting 72%, which is just above national average. Unfortunately, we've got into a new school that was in special measures, came out of special measures within 12 months, and then not had an exam sit-in. And they're phenomenal results from what we've just focusing on that crossover material. So it is something we've tried and tested. And then Seager, one of the other benefits of Pearson is that they do have their Results Plus, which is where, and again, we haven't had the sitting to be able to pull this. So was this your last year at Ulster Academy?
This one's 2018, and then I've got 2019 straight after. But yeah, I did a lot of analysis on 2017, 18 and 19 on what went well for our groups, all of the groups, in fact, the whole year group. And Results Plus is fantastic. I love Results Plus. You can pull from Results Plus your top 10, top 5, top whatever, best performing, worst performing questions, but more so in particular in comparison, not just as a raw score, but as a comparison, if you like, against the Edexcel average. So you can see across the whole of the country, and let's face it, Edexcel Pearson is the most used GCSE paper. So it's a massive chunk of students, what we're doing well against and what we're not doing so well against. And every single sit-in that I was there, so the 2017, 18 and the 19 sit-in was all our top 10 every single time was actually on the foundation paper on the crossover questions every single time. So I've summed it up there on that slide on which topic areas, so you can see trigonometry, vectors, etc. That's the actual questions. So if you want to look a little bit more detail what they were. Then on to 2019, and exactly the same again, crossover was our success. But what, again, the benefit, and Mal just said it, the benefit of Pearson and the support that they give us with the Results Plus and the script viewer, don't forget about script viewer that you won't be able to look at now until we've had that sit-in. You can go back and look at the scripts of these students, of what they're doing, silly errors, all of that stuff, and cross-reference it against your Results Plus information. And what a brilliant bit of training for the team, looking, more importantly, what are the ones that we are not doing as well as compared to national average. So some of the questions that came out from us was, why are we not getting these wordy ones right? Another one, highest common factor, but on higher tier. So our foundation tier students were smashing it. Why was my higher tier students not getting it right? Because they were being pushed on and they forgot their basics. So a brilliant resource that you can look at. Unfortunately, not much in there at the moment because of 2 years out of the game. But next year, really remember this. And I think, Mal, we will have to do this at some point in the next academic year and go back over these things. Yeah,
and I think the one that really brings it home to me to use again, a proper case study is a student that missed out on a grade 5 by 1 mark, yet he didn't get the highest common factor question right that was at the start of a higher tier question. And it's because that group of students weren't going back and reinforcing and interleaving their prior knowledge to make sure that, for us, that would have been a bread and butter skill that our students should know. And it was just a question to say, how are we going back and rechecking that they can still do the basic stuff? So then in terms of where we use the crossover, and this is going to be available from Pearson, is that we've worked with Pearson and we've said that they can use our crossover scheme of work. It is something that we're that passionate about that we think people will benefit from it. The Pearson scheme of work, it's there may be an interactive version. It's on an Excel spreadsheet. We use check-ins and check-outs on them, which are just checking in that know the knowledge they need to and coming at they've then learned what they should. And we try to use it, and I'll try to sum this up, the curriculum audit, is that I'm just trying to whiz through some of these to get where I need to. So this gives you an overview, and I'll go back then. So this is the overview of where we would teach the crossover on a 3-year scheme of work. So, and I've said it's applicable to everybody, every student, depending on where they are on that 3-year journey or 2-year journey. So our low attaining, and you might call them a nurture group, will do all of the stuff that doesn't appear on the crossover scheme of work, just to make sure that they can add, they can subtract, they can do basic charts and diagrams, that they can do metric conversions. Yes, they will see them in context or in questions they're going to use later on, and then they will spend their whole of their time, their Key Stage 4 time, doing the crossover. Our middle attaining students will then start the crossover in year 9 or year 10, depending on whether or not you're doing 2 or 3 year, with a view that at some point, some of those middle attaining students will go off and start on the higher tier. So we do move students between groups. And then our year 9 students, we look to make sure they've done all of that crossover material before the end of year 9. But again, with a view that you've got to use your professional judgment. So this week we're teaching rounding error, or we're reviewing with them because they're high ability year set 1. We've been allowed a set 1 in year 9. And I say we because we split the group between us and we teach different days, me and Seager, that we've had a conversation and said these are high attaining students. We're doing rounding. They're going to do that. They did it within 10 minutes, proved that they could do significant figures, error intervals, but we're now pushing them on to start bringing in some of the content from the working above. So we're saying, right, let's do some upper bounds, lower bounds, do it with calculations. When we get on to expanding brackets, they should be able to do that already, having come from a middle school. We'll then introduce triple brackets. But again, that's about knowing how far we can push them for our high attaining students. But again, if they finish the crossover scheme of work, we will then just focus earlier than a year. So it is a little bit flexible. And we'd be looking to introduce, and again, haters going to hate this, we look to assess them using full papers to be able to pull a grade together for them, because again, context, we have to be able to predict, we have to look at working out that's realistic, but there is also, it's not just the realistic, it's about saying, it's almost in the bag or not in the bag. And I think that if we're hiding that behind figures that we're not comfortable with and confident with, we're not going to be able to offer them the support they need. So but that's where the crossover fits in.
But also that full paper, and I'm a massive advocate that they've got to, one, be always seeing what they're preparing for at the end. But more importantly, that the big argument is that we teach a spiral curriculum, that the maths that they could be part or 1 mark of the last question of a higher or foundation paper could be something that was taught back in year 5, year 6. We know that putting a right angle symbol on a circle theorem in the right position gets a mark. And if we start chipping away and taking questions off, they're not going to be experiencing the full picture, but also not show us what they do and don't know. And I think it's a huge part of our preparation, but also the confidence building. And you might, and I know that we've had the situation where they get sometimes less marks than what they could. No, they get very minimal marks on a paper, and we could have helped that out by trimming the paper right back and seeing part of it. But there's always that part that I know that if we get them trained up consistently, and we've just marked the bench line test for year 11, expanding the brackets on solving an inequality, they got the mark.
Yes.
And that was the last question on that paper. And
I absolutely agree. And it's something I'm a massive advocate of. And again, we're very explicit about training our students for the exams. And the way I sell it to our students is by saying, look, we've got a choice. we could give you a topic test, you'll blitz it, you'll think you can do every percentage question you've ever seen, which is brilliant from a formative assessment. But the reality is that if we didn't give you the full paper until March of year 11, and it was a shock to you, because for some students it's a shock, when would you rather see it? Do you want to see that shock now, so that we can work hand in hand and it's all very soft and cuddly and we'll work with you? Or do you want to leave it till year 11? And our students will, every single one of them will go, I want to know the size of the mountain. And are you drawing a mountain on the screen? And talk about, they need to see the size of the mountain they have to climb. Again, it's context. Because I don't want, and it's being blunt with them, saying I could hide it from you until year 11, but what's the point of that? You need to see it. If I want to get to that mountain over there, show it to me now, and it's a nice steady climb. If I leave it till year 11, it's a really steep mountain to climb. More so with that middle attaining group, that's where me and Seager talk a lot about. We tend to teach those middle attaining kids in year 9, the high attaining kids in year 10, middle attaining, having taught the high attaining in year 9 with a view that we get our year 9 in the set 1s and set 2s in a good place. We will then move down to our middle attainers in year 10. We get them in a good place, and so we're almost moving down and then we intervene in year 11 with intervention. And that's where we do really focus in on the exams. But about being honest with them, so that middle attaining group in year 10, where we're saying they're the higher and foundation ones, we're saying, right, we need to, so me and today we had a conversation, Seager, when's our set 3s see their first higher tier? And we made the decision, again, because of the current climate, that it's not going to be next Tuesday when they have their test. We don't think they're quite ready for it, but we will probably do that. Give them a higher tier paper that will work through in class certain questions to show them some of the strategies they need to be looking at. But then their next assessment could be the higher tier. But again, low stakes. We've got some kind of assessment we can use for working at grades to keep our SLT happy. But then we'll be saying to them, as long as they don't get 0, that's their target. And that's what I said to our year 10s as they were going in for and because of the situation, year 10s last year, some of them did higher at the end of the year. And as they're going in, we're stood on the door saying, just don't get 0. Just don't get 0. That's your target. And it just relaxed them a lot. So that's where we use the crossover in terms of within our whole journey. There's lots of other stuff. So the Pearson one that's going to be released sometime next week, we're a massive advocate again about bread and butter starters. So our bread and butter interleaving, retrieval practice. So every lesson, our students come in, they pick a sheet up, and the sheet it's no excuses. There is no excuse for you not to do any of those questions on that piece of paper as your starter, because I know you've taught it. Because it will be a two-way table, a frequency tree, an error interval, a rounding question, or something that they have been taught. So to support the scheme of work that Pearson are going to put on the Emporium, etc., I will have a page on the blog post where they will be short. It won't be the same ones as us. It will be shortened versions, literally 2 or 3 questions that people can use. That will be, here's a question that we know you did 2 weeks ago, to constantly revisit those skills. And the benefit for that is Twitter is a wonderful place. It's a very cyclical place where the arguments go round and round and round. And some people will say, when do you stop teaching the curriculum? We teach right up until the exam, because we don't stop to revise, because all year we have been constantly revising the stuff that we taught them last week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So that will be something that I will get up and put out probably the same time the scheme of work goes out with Pearson next week. So something to support everybody. I do mention on the overview and how we use it that there's a working towards and a working above. They're not stuff that we're making available, unfortunately. as part of this, we've just said that the vast majority of students that we know that we would like to help help teachers support their students is with that crossover material. And I think it's almost the rest of the stuff is peripheral to it. So that's where it sits in terms of our scheme of work, or in terms of our learning journey. And I hope does that put it in context for everybody? I hope. I'm trying to find the group chat because everything closed on me. So let's go through. So there's a couple of questions. How far do you feel the focus on the crossover helps the higher students? So Jane, just to answer that, I think it's a massive one. So what we're doing with our set ones and set twos, especially given the current context, those crossover questions, the common assessed items, is a massive discussion we have when we come to talk to parents. So, for example, we've got a student that may want to do higher tier, that when we look at the number of marks that they've gained on the common assessed items, of which on this specific paper we've just used, they got 13 out of 24. It forms part of that discussion with the parent and the student to say, okay, if you answered nothing else in the higher tier, you're potentially looking at only getting 13 marks. How does that make you feel? Because it's a big risk that if you hadn't been able to answer that 4-mark estimation question, that could have been 9 marks that puts you at a massive risk. So, but also it wouldn't be something. So then the other thing of part of that is that we found that our set 1 and set 2 students, and it was interesting to watch that the teachers for those groups I've said to them that they need to make sure that the crossover material is still fresh in people's memories. Otherwise, so you could drop in a Pythagoras question 2 or 3 weeks before you do further trigonometry, and you drop in a trigonometry question before you go on to that topic as well, because you don't really want to reteach it. The argument will be, well, they weren't taught it properly the first time around. I don't think that would be the case. Sometimes it's a case they go, oh yeah, I remember Pythagoras now. You do this, this and this. And what they need is with that retrieval, they need to practice till they don't get it wrong. So part of our starters we're encouraging our set 1 and set 2 teachers to use are going back in, and not only so our bread and butter starters for our crossover, they focus on stuff they've been taught before, but also the stuff that is in our working towards scheme of work. So, for example, tomorrow there's converting centimetres to metres. We're never going to do a metric measures lesson. What a waste of time for a grade 4 student. But they will see it in a starter, but then they will have a error intervals question. There's an estimation question, which we've covered already. But our higher tiers concept, or the concept with the higher tier, is that they revisit surds, negative fractional indices, which is stuff they've been taught, but also stuff that is in the crossover. Because that one student that couldn't remember how to do highest common factor, lowest common multiple, it burns. It hurts. And we have to look and think, how do we stop that happening? So the Pearson scheme of work that has the crossover, it's a JustMaths scheme of work we're making it available through Pearson. And it will go on sometime next week. That's just been put in so it covers all of the learning objectives from the Pearson one, which interestingly was put together by somebody very close to me. So it takes all those learning objectives, but also makes sure that it's the stuff that's in the DFE content as well. So yeah, it will be available next week, is the long answer. And if you have any questions at all, I've put Seager's email on here for a reason. He's better at replying to emails.
That's very true. There's about 4 I'm waiting replies from right now from Mal. But And if we've missed any of the questions throughout the chat, just drop an email. I will get back to you. Just give us a bit of a chance, because tomorrow's a hectic one. I've got to sort out all core PE intervention and stuff like that at work tomorrow. But we will reply, even if it's just a silly question that you think, what did you say at that point? Put it in an email. We will reply. Like I said earlier, if there's a school that hasn't had the revision guide that's come through the post, just, again, pop an email to me. I'll try and get that sorted out over the coming days. If anyone wants a trial password to have a look around JustMaths, give me an email. We'll sort that out. If it's an email just to say you were rubbish, that's mal@justmaths.co.uk. Just send that one to Mal. But I will endeavour to get back to everyone and help with anything that we can. In fact, we will. We'll talk through them and get back to you.
Yeah.
But anything at all. And I hope it's been helpful the last hour and a bit of your Wednesday evening.